Wife had an affair with our marriage counselor after he told her I was emotionally unavailable, and when I found out, she said the therapist convinced her our marriage was beyond repair, so I reported him and now they're both facing serious consequences. I'm 32 and my wife Lisa is 29 and we've been married for 6 years, and up until about 8 months ago I thought we had a pretty solid relationship. Sure, we had our problems like any couple, but nothing that seemed unfixable and certainly nothing that would lead to what I'm about to tell you. The trouble started last year when Lisa began complaining that I wasn't emotionally available enough and that she felt disconnected from me and like we were more like roommates than husband and wife, and at first I thought it was just a rough patch that all marriages go through. Lisa said she wanted us to try marriage counseling to work on our communication, and I was totally on board because I love her and wanted to fix whatever was wrong between us, and I thought talking to a professional would help us get back on track. We found this therapist named Dr. Marcus Webb who had great reviews online and specialized in couples counseling, and he seemed really professional and knowledgeable during our first session, and I felt hopeful that he could help us work through our issues. But right from the beginning, Dr. Webb seemed to focus a lot on my supposed shortcomings and would constantly ask Lisa how my behavior made her feel while barely giving me a chance to explain my side of things, and it started to feel like I was being ganged up on. During our third session, Dr. Webb told Lisa that I showed classic signs of emotional unavailability and that this was probably a deep-rooted issue stemming from my childhood and relationship with my parents, and he suggested that Lisa deserved better emotional support. I tried to defend myself and explain that I do care about Lisa's feelings and that maybe I just express emotions differently than she does, but Dr. Webb cut me off and said that denial was typical for emotionally unavailable people and that recognizing the problem was the first step. Lisa started nodding along with everything Dr. Webb said, and I could see her getting more and more convinced that I was this terrible emotionally distant husband who was holding her back from true happiness and fulfillment in our marriage. After each session, Lisa would come home energized and talkative about all the insights Dr. Webb had shared with her, and she'd try to get me to admit that I had serious emotional problems that needed to be fixed, and when I pushed back she'd say I was proving his point. Dr. Webb suggested that Lisa start individual sessions with him to work on her own emotional needs and self-worth, and he said this would help her communicate better with me and set healthy boundaries in our relationship, and Lisa was thrilled about the idea. I thought it was weird that our marriage counselor wanted to see my wife alone, but Lisa said it was totally normal and that Dr. Webb had explained that sometimes one partner needs extra support to break through years of emotional damage caused by the other partner. The individual sessions started about 4 months ago, and that's when Lisa's behavior toward me really changed dramatically, and she became cold and distant and started treating me like I was some kind of emotional abuser who had been tormenting her for years. She'd come home from her sessions with Dr. Webb and immediately start fights with me about things that had never been problems before, and she'd use all this therapy language about boundaries and emotional validation that sounded like she was reading from a script. Lisa started staying out later and later after her therapy sessions, saying she needed time to process everything Dr. Webb was helping her understand about herself and our toxic relationship dynamics, and when I asked her to come home earlier she'd accuse me of being controlling. I suggested that maybe we should try a different counselor because I didn't feel like Dr. Webb was helping us reconnect as a couple, but Lisa got furious and said that I just didn't want to face the truth about my emotional problems and that Dr. Webb was the first person who really understood her. Things got so bad that we were barely speaking and Lisa was treating me like a stranger in my own house, and I started to wonder if our marriage was really as broken as Dr. Webb kept telling her it was, and maybe I really was as emotionally unavailable as they claimed. Last month I decided to surprise Lisa by bringing her flowers after one of her therapy sessions, and I drove to Dr. Webb's office building and waited in the parking lot for her appointment to end so I could take her out to dinner and try to reconnect. When I saw Lisa come out of the building, she wasn't alone and Dr. Webb was with her, and they were holding hands and laughing together like they were on a date, and then I watched in complete shock as he pulled her into his arms and kissed her passionately right there in the parking lot. I sat in my car for probably 10 minutes just staring at them because I couldn't process what I was seeing, and then they got into Dr. Webb's car together and drove away, and I realized that my wife was having an affair with our marriage counselor. I followed them to a restaurant across town and watched them have dinner together, and they were holding hands across the table and looking at each other like they were madly in love, and it was obvious that this wasn't their first date. I confronted Lisa when she got home that night and told her I had seen her with Dr. Webb, and she didn't even try to deny it, and instead she said that Dr. Webb had helped her realize that our marriage was emotionally abusive and that she deserved to be with someone who truly understood her. She said that Dr. Webb had shown her what real emotional intimacy looked like and that she had never experienced that kind of connection with me, and that she was finally brave enough to leave our toxic relationship and be with someone who valued her as a person. I was absolutely floored because this woman was using therapy language to justify cheating on me with our marriage counselor and acting like I was the villain for being upset about it, and she seemed to genuinely believe that Dr. Webb was some kind of relationship savior. Lisa said that Dr. Webb had explained to her that I would probably react with anger and try to make her feel guilty because emotionally unavailable people can't handle being abandoned, and that my reaction was just proving that she was making the right choice by leaving me. I told Lisa that Dr. Webb was a predator who had manipulated both of us and destroyed our marriage for his own sick gratification, but she said I was just jealous because I could never give her the emotional support that Dr. Webb provided, and that I needed to accept that our marriage was over. She packed a bag and left that night to stay with Dr. Webb, and I sat in our empty house trying to figure out how my life had fallen apart so completely and how a man I had trusted to help save my marriage had systematically destroyed it instead. Update 1. After Lisa moved out, I started doing research on Dr. Webb and discovered that what he had done to us wasn't just unethical, it was illegal, and that therapists who have sexual relationships with their patients can lose their licenses and face criminal charges. I found out that Dr. Webb had been reported twice before for inappropriate relationships with female clients, but both cases had been settled privately and he had managed to keep his license and continue practicing, which made me sick to think about how many other marriages he might have destroyed. I contacted the state licensing board and filed a formal complaint against Dr. Webb detailing everything that had happened during our counseling sessions and how he had used his position of authority to manipulate my wife into having an affair with him. The licensing board investigator told me that they take these cases very seriously because therapists who exploit their patients often follow similar patterns of behavior, and that they would be conducting a thorough investigation into Dr. Webb's practices and other clients. I also contacted a lawyer who specializes in professional malpractice cases, and he said that what Dr. Webb had done was called therapeutic abuse and that I had grounds for both criminal charges and a civil lawsuit that could result in significant financial damages. Lisa kept texting me asking me to sign divorce papers and saying that Dr. Webb had helped her realize that she needed to cut all ties with me to fully heal from the emotional damage I had caused her over the years, and that dragging out our separation was just more evidence of my controlling behavior. I ignored her texts because I was focused on building my case against Dr. Webb and gathering evidence of how he had manipulated our counseling sessions to break up our marriage and seduce my wife, and I wanted him to face consequences for what he had done. The licensing board investigator interviewed me for over 3 hours and asked me detailed questions about every session we had with Dr. Webb and how his behavior had changed over time and whether I had noticed any inappropriate interactions between him and Lisa. I gave them copies of all our session notes and receipts and text messages between Lisa and me where she quoted things Dr. Webb had said about our relationship, and the investigator said this was exactly the kind of evidence they needed to prove professional misconduct. 2 weeks later, the investigator called me back and said that they had interviewed 3 other former female clients of Dr. Webb who had similar experiences and that they were moving forward with formal charges that could result in him losing his license permanently. Update 2. The investigation into Dr. Webb expanded when more of his former clients came forward with stories about how he had convinced them that their husbands were emotionally abusive and that they deserved better relationships, and several of them admitted to having affairs with him. One woman named Jennifer told investigators that Dr. Webb had used almost identical language with her about emotional unavailability and had convinced her to leave her husband of 12 years, and when their affair ended, Dr. Webb had simply moved on to his next vulnerable client. Another woman named Michelle said that Dr. Webb had a whole system for seducing married women by first isolating them from their husbands during individual sessions and then gradually convincing them that their marriages were hopeless and that he was the only one who truly understood them. The licensing board suspended Dr. Webb's license pending the outcome of their investigation, and he was also arrested on charges of professional misconduct and sexual exploitation of a patient, which are felony charges that could send him to prison for several years. Lisa finally started to realize that she had been manipulated when the local news picked up the story about Dr. Webb's arrest, and she saw interviews with his other victims who described exactly the same pattern of behavior that she had experienced. She called me crying and saying that she was confused and didn't know what to believe anymore because Dr. Webb had seemed so genuine and caring, and she couldn't understand how someone who claimed to be helping people could be so manipulative and predatory. I told Lisa that I was glad she was starting to see the truth, but that the damage to our marriage might be irreparable because she had chosen to believe a stranger over her own husband and had moved in with another man without even trying to work things out between us. Lisa begged me to consider reconciliation and said that she realized now that Dr. Webb had poisoned her mind against me and that she wanted to try real marriage counseling with a different therapist to see if we could rebuild what we had lost. But I had spent months dealing with the aftermath of her affair and the humiliation of having our marriage destroyed by a predatory therapist, and I wasn't sure if I could ever trust her again or get past the things she had said and done while under Dr. Webb's influence. I told Lisa that I needed time to think about whether our marriage could be saved, and that first I wanted to see Dr. Webb face justice for what he had done to us and all his other victims before I could even consider trying to rebuild our relationship. Final update. Dr. Webb's trial started last month, and I testified about how he had systematically destroyed my marriage by convincing my wife that I was emotionally abusive and that she deserved better treatment than I could provide, and how he had used his position of authority to seduce her. 5 other women testified about similar experiences with Dr. Webb, and the pattern of behavior was so clear and consistent that the jury convicted him on all charges, and he was sentenced to 4 years in prison and ordered to pay restitution to all his victims. The licensing board also permanently revoked Dr. Webb's license and banned him from ever practicing therapy again, and they referred his case to other states where he might try to get licensed in the future to make sure he can never hurt anyone else. Lisa attended the trial and heard all the testimony from Dr. Webb's other victims, and she finally understood how completely she had been manipulated and how he had used proven techniques to break up marriages and exploit vulnerable women. After the trial, Lisa and I started seeing a new marriage counselor who specializes in helping couples recover from therapeutic abuse, and we've been working on rebuilding trust and communication and understanding how Dr. Webb's manipulation affected both of us. It's been a slow process, and there are still days when I wonder if we can really get past everything that happened, but Lisa has been completely transparent about her relationship with Dr. Webb and has cut all contact with him and is working hard to earn back my trust. The civil lawsuit against Dr. Webb resulted in a significant settlement that will help pay for our ongoing therapy and also provide some financial compensation for the damage he caused to our marriage and our lives. Lisa has also become an advocate for other victims of therapeutic abuse, and she speaks at conferences about how predatory therapists use their authority to manipulate vulnerable clients and destroy families, and she's helping to push for stronger regulations in the mental health field. We're still working on our marriage, and I'm not sure what the future holds, but at least now we're dealing with our real problems instead of the fake ones that Dr. Webb created to serve his own twisted purposes, and we have a chance to build something genuine together. Dr. Webb is exactly where he belongs, and I hope his time in prison gives him a chance to think about all the lives he destroyed and all the families he tore apart just so he could satisfy his own sick desires and feel powerful over vulnerable people. Sometimes I think about how different things might have been if we had never walked into his office, but then I realize that he would have just found other victims, and at least now he can't hurt anyone else and other couples won't have to go through what we went through. Justice was served, and that's more than a lot of his victims ever got.